What's up, Wargamers? We're back and we've got another edition of Budget Wargamer here, and I want to talk about the Warhammer 40,000 Shadowspear Box Set that's coming up for pre-order. And as we're heading out to Gamma next week from March 11th through March 15th, I'm expecting to see some other news regarding Games Workshop and some other upcoming releases. We're really thinking that the War Master Abaddon is probably going to be revealed there, but that's to be determined, so stay tuned for some more videos as we try to get some more info next week from Games Workshop when we're at Gamma. So let's go ahead and dive into the Shadowspear Box Set, which you can pick up for about $160, I believe is the price in the United States. But let's go ahead and take a look here. I'm right now on warhammercommunity.com and looking at their official announcement of what is in the Shadowspear Box Set. So we're finding two forces in this box. One of them is going to be the new Chaos Marines with all new models. There's even entirely new units included in here, as well as refreshed Obliterators and new Chaos Space Marines. And then they're paired off against the new Primaris Vanguard forces, or at least I'm calling them Primaris Vanguard forces. I think they're just calling them Space Marine Vanguards, which appear to be Primaris scale, but they have different abilities than their typical Primaris brethren. And there's all new units included in there as well, so let's dive in and take a look. First up, we've got what they're calling the Daemonkin, and these are led by a Chaos Sorcerer, and they are the Heretic Astartes. So in there, we've got a 10-man squad of Chaos Marines with all new poses, and then also they're all single pose, but you're going to get a plasma gun and an autocannon included in that unit. And then what people are really seeming to take a look at are the Possessed, which can be fielded in squads of 1 to 2, but if you field them in pairs, they can split off and become separate units on their own. So the stats on these guys are fairly nasty. The claw off of this guy, despite a lot of people thinking it was going to be Tyranids or something related to the Ambull, actually turned out to be a Possessed. And then the Obliterators are going to be able to be fielded in squads of up to 3, I believe. But these new poses make them a lot larger than before. Plastic, of course, will be a lot friendlier, because if you had the older models with the pewter, they were very top-heavy and tended to fall over on the battlefield on their 40mm bases. So these guys are going to come with a lot of flesh poking through. These were always nasty, but now you're going to see a lot more people fielding them because they haven't been easily able to get their hands on the Obliterators here in the last couple years. The Vanguard forces are going to include a captain, a psyker, a 10-man squad of the new Vanguard Marines, as well as a 3-man squad with some sort of sniper rifles, and then also a 3-man squad that looks like it's the Inceptors, but it's actually a totally different type of unit that's still able to fly and come in from high orbit, but those guys are fielding a special type of autocannon, which makes them quite a bit different and different battlefield role than the existing Inceptors that are fielding the twin bolters or twin plasma. So taking a look, I think a lot of people have been making fun of these models, but it's to be seen how good they're going to be on the battlefield. But you know that a lot of people are going to pick up the Shadowspear box, so there's going to be a lot of people playing these new Vanguard forces, and you're going to have to learn to adapt your existing armies to play against these new rules that these guys bring to the tabletop, because it's going to make them a bit harder to hit from what I've seen leaked out there from Spiky Bits and on Fayette 2012, which we'll take a look at here in just a little bit. Thankfully, because these are all new units, you're going to get 2 miniature codexes included in the box, which reminds me a lot about the Forgebane box set when they came out with the new rules at that time for the Armiger Warglaves. Now, what we saw between these miniature codexes and the official codexes when they released the Imperial Knights for 8th edition, we saw the Armiger Warglaves actually get quite a bit of editing done to not only their points but to their abilities. So take this with a grain of salt. These are really going to kind of be temporary rules, so that way you can play straight out of the box, but expect that when a full-on codex revision comes around, I'm assuming that they're going to lump these into the Space Marines or Index Astartes, Adeptus Astartes. When those guys come out, they'll probably be in the mainstream codex, but they could bring them out as a totally separate standalone, but I find that to be weird if they decided to do it that way. So think of these as beyond beta rules, because they're not beta, they're actually going to be official, but just expect them to change a little bit and get some feedback in the ITC circuits from people who are actually using them competitively, because there didn't appear to be a lot of beta testing out there in the general public prior to the release. And then likewise, you're going to get a miniature codex for the Daemonkin that's going to include all the necessary rules to play with the new units. That does mean that the Obliterators in this codex are going to be slightly different than the rules for them in the main Chaos Space Marines codex. But I would bet that they wouldn't overwrite those main rules if you're playing out of just the main codex. That they would only work with these new Obliterator rules if you use the new Daemonkin codex. And then there's the Shadowspear rulebook, which is really just going to be a watered-down version of the main 40k rulebook that gives you just enough rules to play, but it's probably not going to include all of the mainstream rules that are currently out there for 8th edition, but I would expect that they would have new scenarios and things like that, new objectives, based upon these new types of units, especially for the Vanguard, because they're totally different than the regular Space Marines, despite looking like they're still in some sort of power armor. So when we take another look, I'm just going to go to Fayette 2012, which is also citing the Warhammer community site, showing the unboxing of what's inside the box. This is a lot like the other starter boxes that have come out recently. Most of the other starter boxes have been temporary, like Tooth and Claw. What was the one with the Eldar and the Space Marines I've got back here? Wake the Dead. Those boxes were mainly a repackaging of existing models with one limited edition model or one unique model for each side, whereas this is going to be 100% new models all together throughout the box. So they're showing us the sprues here. A lot of people will be interested in some of the new units, mainly this new Walker, the new Crawler that will be out. This will be the first that this model's ever appeared in Warhammer 40,000. So it's probably a new type of Chaos unit, a lot smaller than a Defiler, but it is going to still be a lot larger than some of the other models. What I think it's going to equate to in size, based upon what I've seen, is the Death Guard Myphitic Blight Haulers. Those have been a really good unit for those that have used them, and I expect them maybe to not have a rule of 3 like the Myphitic Blight Haulers have for a buff, but to be about that size and to be roughly that type of combat role, maybe even giving a zoned ability. With the Vanguard, we've got some of the character models shown here, and then there's just going to be a lot of new units. So because this is new units for 2 mainstream armies, primarily the Adeptus Astartes, but also the Heretic Astartes, you're going to see a lot of game change play, or a lot of player focus shifting towards playing these 2 new armies, because at about 160 bucks, getting that many models out of a force for $80, half the box, is going to catapult a lot of existing players into playing these new types of armies, and it's also going to be a really good box for those that want to get into Warhammer 40,000 that may not currently be attracted to playing the Death Guard. Although what I've seen lately is that the Death Guard still remain to be very competitive, depending on how you build your list, and the Primaris Marines, of course, have always been competitive. Both of which just got a really big buff with the Bolter Beta rules. I'm stumbling over my speech because I haven't done a video in such a long time, and I appreciate you guys sticking around. I'd like to hear in the comments what you guys are still up to. I decided to become a partner on a Warhammer game store. We also sell like Magic cards, board games, things like that, but primarily focusing on Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar. So that was a big jump to go from a hobbyist, longtime hobbyist, been playing for like 21, 22 years, finally decided to bite off a little bit and become a partner on a game store and run that myself. So that has taken some of the basically some of the resources I picked up years ago when I worked for Games Workshop, and I'm trying to adapt those to the modern age of the internet gamer who's full of information and insights and stuff like that. And I find it really strange that even as a retailer, you don't get any more information ahead of time from your representatives at Games Workshop than what we get here on the Warhammer community site. So there's no real inside source. Anything we find out, you find out the same day. So that does make it a little strange when you're only able to project your pre-orders and get customers' pre-orders like a week or 2 ahead of time. But these sprues are looking like they're all going to be single pose miniatures, which some people may not like. A lot of people are going to like that though, because it makes the models more dynamically posed than some of the old multi-pose miniatures, in my opinion. And it also makes them easier to put together for existing gamers and new gamers. I think this box is going to attract some new players into the game. I don't think it's going to be as revolutionary as, say, like a whole new edition starter box, and I don't think that Games Workshop is positioning this to be a replacement of the Dark Imperium box, and part of the reason is that this fits too much of the mold of their bi-monthly, like every other month, combat force box or player-on-player box, but it also doesn't include the full rulebook. So you're missing that full $50 hard copy rulebook here in this box set. So it is a good starting point, but it's not meant to be the overall new player introductory box set. So that's kind of something to take with a grain of salt. But included in those codexes, the Mini-Codexes, you're not only going to have the stats for all of the models that are in the box, and I don't think it's going to include stats for models outside of the box, but it may give you options to bring some of those forces from the pre-existing model line into this army to be able to play it, especially with the Index Heretic Astartes. At least that's what I'm believing. So that's what we've got looking forward to. Let's dive in a little bit into some of the other resources that we've seen on here, because I think I had seen on here that there were some data sheets, and that's real important here to understand before you get into purchasing the box just because you love the models and you want to support the game. What's really new? What special rules do these new models bring in? And I think the Vanguard are bringing in some of the most unique models and most unique rules out of this box set. Some of it's going to be their weapons, and some of it's actually going to be their armor or special equipment. So when we look through here, this is the captain in Phobos Armour. So now Phobos Armour is different than your Mark 10 Primaris armor, but they still have the same number of wounds as Primaris Marines. In addition to that, he's also got a camo cloak, and the camo cloak is going to add 2 to his saving throw when he's in cover, meaning that he's going to have quite a good armor save. Already starting at a 3+, he's pretty much going to have like a 1+ armor save sitting in cover, meaning that if you hit him with an armor penetrating weapon of only -1, he's still going to make saves on a 2+. So that's going to mean that his 4+ invulnerable save he's getting from the Iron Halo like a standard captain might come into play less frequently than his regular Primaris counterpart. So being in his Phobos armor, he's going to have this special rule of concealed position. So he's not the only one that's got it. The Psychers also got it, and I believe that unit of 3 snipers also has the same special rule, but we'll take a look if we can find those as well. But concealed position says that when you set up this model, during your deployment, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from the enemy's deployment zone and an enemy model. So basically, you're starting off turn 1 in a deep strike-like position, deep strike-like, with hyphens and quotation marks. But it's a deep strike-like position that's going to put you in the advanced place to be able to probably get into combat on the first turn, because unlike deep striking, you're still going to be able to make your full movement and make an assault or make a charge afterwards. So it's really going to get him right into the people's face. If you can strategically place him into cover as well, that would be good in case you happen to lose the dice roll for getting the first turn. That would give you at least that ability to be able to be in cover, to absorb and deflect a little bit more shots from your opponent, but also just going to still give you that ability to pop out of that cover and make that assault in case you do win the first turn roll. And then he's also got the Omni Scrambler, and it says enemy units that are set up on the battlefield as reinforcements cannot be set up within 12 inches of this model. That means instead of the normal 9-inch bubble or 9-inch distance required when somebody does come into the battlefield, whether it be deep strike or some other teleportation rule, they're going to have to be 12 inches away from him instead of 9 inches away, which is pretty much going to abate any type of assault that could happen that first turn from most units that would come into the battlefield. So that does make him pretty beefy. Aside from that, he's got a new type of bolter that's going to be a master crafted instigator bolt carbine. So this is a 30-inch range, quite like the bolt rifles that you see on the Primaris Space Marines, but it has an AP of -2 and does 2 damage. It's also considered a heavy weapon. So moving and shooting, you're going to be at a -1 to hit. And it says the weapon, here's where it gets nasty. The weapon can target a character, even if it's not the closest enemy unit. So you're only going to get 1 shot, that it's not rapid fire, thankfully, and it can only cause up to 2 damage. But it's a great harassing weapon, especially if you're trying to take out someone's characters, whether like it's an elite character that adds an area of effect buff, something like the Tallyman or something like that to your opponent's Death Guard army, or a Cryptek. Being able to put wounds on him before killing the screening units that are in front of him, like maybe you're shooting a Tallyman or you're shooting a Plague Surgeon, and you're wanting to get rid of those buffs that he's giving to the 20 or 40 Poxwalkers that are screening in front of the characters. This is just going to shoot right past that. If you hit and wound, you're going to basically take that type of character down to about half of its remaining wounds. So that makes it really cool. Rites of Battle, you can reroll hits of 1 made for friendly character or chapter units within 6 inches. That's standard. So let's move on and take a look at some of the other stuff in here. So the Suppressor squad, these are the guys that have the jump packs and have the autocannons on them. It's a special type of autocannon, but they have a 12-inch move. They also, I believe, have the fly keyword. They do. So that makes them a lot like the Inceptors. Plus, they have the grav shoots that are kind of like the same thing, where they can come into the battlefield. They don't appear to have the same Hammer of Wrath style assault that the Inceptors have, but they're not meant for that type of close combat battlefield role. These guys are just to get strategically into the battlefield where needed. But they've got suppressing fire, and it says if the unit destroys an enemy if this unit destroys any enemy models in your shooting phase with an accelerator autocannon, the destroyed model's unit cannot fire Overwatch until the end of the turn. So these guys would be able to be used in conjunction to pop onto the battlefield, shoot an enemy target strategically, because once you see the stats on this, if you're not already reading that already, they are probably going to kill at least one model from most squads, just given statistics. And then your other units could come in and make a charge without having to worry about getting fired Overwatch. Especially if your opponent has something like flame weapons in it that are going to auto hit when they roll their d6, 2d6, whatever the dice roll may be. They're not even going to be able to fire those types of weapons in a response just for losing one enemy model. But they do have to destroy an entire model. So an army like Adeptus Custodes that has 3 wounds, 4 wounds per model is not as likely to lose one model from fire, but the type of damage output that these weapons do, they may still even cause that type of effect. So the Accelerator autocannon is 48-inch range, heavy 2, very similar to the autocannon, and it's strength 7, AP -2. I think the regular autocannons are AP -1, and then it's 2 damage per successful wound. So that's going to take away some of the big units out there, wounding most things on a 3, unless we're talking about shooting things like Armigers or Imperial Knights or special characters with that high toughness, or tanks. But even if shooting tanks, it's still going to have that ability to knock back most 3+ armor saves to a 5+, and causing 2 damage per shot with two shots each. That means these guys are putting out 6 shots, hitting on 3s. If they move, though, they're still going to take the -1 penalty to hit, but you know, basically they're still going to be causing a lot of damage with everything they shoot. And this makes them have a totally different battlefield role, as I said, than the Inceptors. So that gives them a cool new rule that we don't see on most of the other ones. The Chaos Space Marines are a little bit more standard fare. They're not like Primaris. I did hear that people were saying that these new Chaos Space Marines were going to be like the Chaos Primaris. They don't appear to be that way. They might be that way in size in terms of the model, but they only have 1 wound apiece, which does differentiate them there from that. But they do have the Death to the False Emperor rule, and then I don't see any new weapons being listed there for them, but they're still a great set of models. Now, the Greater Possessed are those 2 new models that have the mutations and things like that to them. They're a little bit faster than your average Marine with a high weapon skill. A strength and toughness of 5 is going to make them quite a bit harder to kill than your normal Marine, but also 5 wounds and a 3+ save. Let's take a look at what else they've got. It says Champions of the Host. It says the first time this unit is set up, all models in this unit must be set up, and then they can separate. So you field 2 if you want to, and then you can separate them into 2 totally separate units. They are demonic with a 5+ invulnerable save, and then the Locus of Power says it adds 1 to the strength characteristic of all Chaos, Legion, Demon units while they're within 6 inches of this model. So if you're going to field them in conjunction with other demonic units, it's going to make things like the Plague Bearers Bloodletters, they're going to make Bloodletters so nasty, and with that 6-inch area of effect, you would want to spread them out, and they are treated as a character. So they do get the benefit of being a character, meaning that most people, aside from these new Vanguard, are going to not be able to target them once they're not the closest enemy unit. The Infiltrator squad, these are the guys that I was talking about earlier with the sniper rifles. A lot of people want to know what this Marksman Bolt Carbine is going to do. Thankfully, unlike sniper rifles, it is only a 24-inch range weapon, but it is rapid fire and it is a bolt weapon. So that means that it should be getting the bolter beta rules to apply to this rapid fire ability, meaning that at 24 inches, it's still going to fire 2 full shots apiece. It's only strength 4, no AP, and 1 damage, just like a standard bolter, but here's where the special rules for that come into play. Each unmodified hit roll of 6 made for this weapon's attacks automatically hits and results in a wound. You do not make a wound roll for that attack. It's not quite like a mortal wound because the opponent will still get their armor save at full value since there's no AP on this, but that just means that you're just taking your 6s that hit, you're bypassing the wound roll. You're not adding that in addition to existing wounds that you're going to take. But that does make it pretty neat, like a sniper rifle. They also have some other abilities in here that you'll want to take a look at, including the Omni Scramblers that are going to keep your opponent's Deep Strikers from being able to get right in your face at the 9 inches. It creates that 12-inch area bubble. If you layer these out with that captain with the Omni Scrambler and these guys with the Omni Scrambler and set your 12-inch area of effect to overlap, you're going to create large zones that are going to basically void out your opponent's ability to get there. So if you have 12 inches from these guys and your Primaris captain is roughly 24 inches away, that 12-inch range coming up right next to him is going to make it so that your opponent's effectively going to have almost a 24-inch stretch across the battlefield that they can't deep strike or deploy from reserves into. And that's going to make these guys deny that to the opponent and even deny objectives to the opponent by being able to get on there. Concealed positions gives them a similar rule, just like the captain, so they're going to be able to deploy within 9 inches of an opponent's deployment zone or opponent's models, whichever makes them the furthest away. So, oh, these are my bad. These are actually the new guys that are like the tactical Marines. These are fielded in squad of 10. Apologies, I'm still getting used to these models as I haven't had them in the box. The Eliminators is what I meant. So that's pretty nasty if the normal bolt carbines are getting that 24-inch range and 6s to hit are causing automatic wounds. Here's the bolt sniper rifle that can target characters even if they're not the closest enemy unit. This is a heavy 1 weapon with 3 types of rounds. You can actually be heavy 3 if you're doing the hyper frag round, so it's going to fire out like a projectile that'll kind of spread apart and do multiple damage. Not quite like a shotgun, but I think like a sabot round or something like that. But at 36-inch range, it still gets the ability with the Executioner that on a 6+ for the weapon, it causes a mortal wound, so that makes it slightly better than the other ones, in addition to its normal damage. So these guys are just going to be bad. And I want to cut the video short here because it's been running long for about 22 minutes, but I appreciate you guys chiming in to Budget Wargamer, and I plan to do a lot more videos for you guys coming up soon.